Okay, well, I guess we'll just begin. The One of the things we talked about yesterday was the fact that mincha time is a time that officially we're not supposed to do berchas kohen. And there was one opinion that okayed it, Reb Meir, but the halacha seems to follow Reb Yosi. And Reb Yosi was of the opinion that mincha we don't do berchas koyanim. And the reason is because it's confused with the mincha. Mincha, we don't do berchas koyanim even on a fast day because it'll be confused with the mincha during the regular day, on a regular mincha, regular day. Mincha is the afternoon service. The afternoon service, sometimes people are drunk because they eat their lunch and they drink wine with it. Therefore, we don't do berchas kohanim at mincha. But even on a fast day, when people are not drunk, like today is a fast day, and people are not drunk because they're not going to eat, they're not going to drink. It's a fast day. Nevertheless, it'll be confused with a regular fast day, and therefore mincha we don't do the berchas kohanim. Basically, we don't want the kohanim to make a mistake on a regular day and do it at mincha and end up sinning by being drunk and doing berchos kohanim, doing the blessing of the priests. So that's all the regular scenario. What about if you daven mincha late? So our Gemara had said that if you daven mincha late, then it's more similar to ne'ilah rather than mincha, because those days they seem to have daven mincha earlier. And it's a little unclear in the Gemara when they actually daven mincha. Just says they daven early. And I did mention yesterday that there are two opinions. There's the Thur and the Rambam. The Thur holds that the appropriate time to daven mincha is at 6.5 hours into the day, which would mean like 12:30 approximately. And the Rambam holds that the preferable time to daven is really 9.5 hours into the day. In the Hebrew terminology, there's a difference between these two times are either called mincha gedola or mincha ketana, the big mincha or the small mincha. The big mincha means that there's a lot of time left into the day, and the small mincha is there's a small amount of time left in the day. Basically, the what it boils down to is the carbon, the afternoon sacrifice. There was the official time when it was always brought. It was always brought 9.5 hours into the day, which would mean like 3:30 on a day that's 6 a.m. sunrise to 6 p.m. sunset. So 9.5 hours into the day would be 3:30. That's when they would sacrifice the afternoon sacrifice called a Talmud Shel Bein Ha'arbayim. And that would be the apropos time to daven mincha because the service, the afternoon service, is in place of the sacrifice. However, on Erev Pesach, they would bring the afternoon sacrifice as early as they could, which would be 6.5 hours into the day. So the question would be, when we want to daven during the year, should we follow the fact that, according to halacha, 6.5 hours is okay, as we see on Erev Pesach when they have to bring many Paschal offerings, so they quickly bring the daily afternoon sacrifice early in order to have time to bring the Paschal offering. So the fact that it's allowed and it's done as part of the service on Erev Pesach is to bring the sacrifice at that time. It's obviously okay. If it's okay then, so it should be okay all year round. The fact is that in the temple, they would wait till 9.5 hours to bring the afternoon sacrifice. Doesn't mean that it has to be that way. It could have been earlier. There's just no reason to do it earlier. They wanted to maybe they'd like to give time for other people to bring more other sacrifices which you don't bring afterwards. So basically it boils down to the Rambam says, well, all year round we do the afternoon sacrifice at 9.5 hours into the day. That's when the preferable time to daven mincha. You really shouldn't daven 12:30 unless you need to. You could, and as we see
Rabbi,
from Pesach. But the Thur says no. Erev Pesach shows you could daven at 12 and a half hours, and 6.5 hours into the day at 12:30, and that's okay all along. So there is that famous machlokes. Again, according to everyone, you're fulfilled the mitzvah, and you davened, and it's acceptable. The only question is it more preferable to daven mincha later? Yes, David.
what does Mincha Gedola include that Mincha Ketana doesn't have?
Well, it's just a term that, in other words, it's called the earlier mincha or the later mincha.
Because
Not
when I
really
was in, when I
sure.
was
Yeah,
in when I was in Yerushalayim by the Kosel, and they
yeah.
made a minyan for Mincha, and they said Mincha Gedola, and I thought it was regular Mincha, and all of a sudden I got roped into this long Shemona Esrei, this long drawn out Mincha. I couldn't figure out what was going on.
I'm not familiar with
Nothing
anything
different.
like that, except for the fact that maybe it was Erev Rosh Chodesh, which is called Yom Kippur Katan. Maybe it was a day. Is it possible that it was like it was like Yom Kippur Katan, and they were
Uh,
doing slichas and stuff. But
oh,
so maybe but I don't
I,
know why they would specifically call that Mincha Gedola. They would call it Yom Kippur Katan.
I
That's
think
what I would think.
Ezra, I think Ezra might have an answer. Ezra.
No, to me
Oh,
it's the same thing. You're just saying it. This is the earliest time that you can say mincha, and mincha gedola is, and the other one is because in Berachot there was a discussion as to when do you say mincha, and they had different opinions. So you had plag, you had mincha gedola, you had mincha ketana, and you had before shkia. So those are different times. So people can daven at any of these times that they want.
oh,
And again, those were discussed in Brachot, and we already discussed those things.
I thought it was Mincha Gedola because it was much longer. It was
No,
much longer.
not,
Much
I've
much.
never experienced that.
Uh,
Never experienced
okay. I thought it was a longer, drawn out. There was much more prayers said.
that. Maybe what the rabbi was telling you is probably what was happening, and people just didn't realize it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So the story is that mincha is davened in many yeshivas. Actually, they daven mincha gedayla. They daven the earlier mincha, and even though there are opinions that it's not the most apropos time, but nevertheless, many yeshivas do it as it just works out that way because you're not allowed to eat a official meal like a big meal before you daven. So it comes out that so many yeshivas where it's mincha time already. It's mincha gedola time, I should say. It's already 12:30 or after daylight savings time, there would be 1:30. But that's approximately when the time in that ballpark is the time to daven mincha. And therefore, so they will daven at mincha gedola in order to be able to have lunch without transgressing that sin. So basically, you daven mincha and then you can have lunch. So many yeshivas do it that way, and it's 100. It's okay. It's definitely acceptable. Our Gemara seems to be saying that there were many people that it seems like that was the custom to even daven mincha early on a regular day. That's the way they always did it. Maybe for the same reason. Maybe in order to eat a meal, they davened early. I'm just giving a practical application of why it's possible that they would do that, and then they would maybe come back to shul for Ma'ariv later or whatever. But that's our Gemara says that the mincha was normally daven late. Now the Gemara says that we uh, seem to say Berachas Koyanim and mincha. How could that be? So the answer the Gemara gave was, yeah, because your mincha that you are davening on a fast day is not comparable. It's not interchangeable. It's not mistakenable for the regular mincha, because the regular mincha you always daven early, and on a fast day you daven late. It's more similar to Ne'ilah. In the Ne'ilah prayer, even Rabbi Yossi agrees that you could say Nesias Kapayim. It's not confusing with mincha. It's more. So your mincha is more similar to Ne'ilah. So I asked yesterday. I said that it seems surprising. There's many places where they daven mincha early on a fast day, and they say the Yalakenu, the Lakavasenu, that we say this blessing of Berchas Kainim. We seem to add it in, even though it's not really the time to do Berchas Kainim, because this mincha is done. We're doing it early. This type of mincha is interchangeable with the regular mincha. I also asked a different question. That is that nowadays we actually daven mincha late, so that could be problematic, because now the mincha that we daven on a fast day late is also interchangeable with the regular mincha that we daven late, and therefore that also could be problematic to say Berchas Kainim. So I'm questioning the whole mincha, Berchas Kainim, both if you daven mincha early or if you daven mincha late. Both seemingly could be problematic to do Berchas Kainim, and we do it. It's part of the part of the davening. Now, I will also mention that if you look at a machzor of Yom Kippur, you will see that there's Berchas Kainim in mincha and in Ne'ilah. In other words, we say the Elokenu Elokevasenu, we say that prayer at mincha, the mincha, and at the Ne'ilah prayer. So what seemingly the understanding is that once the rabbis established, they made a rule, and they established that if you daven mincha on a fast day, you're supposed to say Berchas Kainim. Why? The reason why they established it that way was because people daven mincha later on a fast day than they regularly daven, but they made a rule that you could say Berchas Kainim. So it was established to do Berchas Kainim. So according to that, even if you daven early, it was already established that mincha, they sort of made a blanket rule that even though it might not always apply the reason, but the fact is they just said, okay, mincha, we do Berchas Kainim now. And the reason they did that was because of the logic behind it, that the reason behind it that it's not, that it was normally daven later, and that was different than the regular mincha. But the fact is they made such a rule. So that could be a thought. It is mentioned by one of the poskim. But
Rabbi.
I'm also told that in Eretz Yisrael, actually, the official rule is that if you daven early, you don't do the Berchas Kainim. Some say don't, not to do the Berchas Kainim. Seems to be an accepted view. I'm pulling it up here from the Piskei Teshuvos. This is a gathering of all the minhagim and halachas of very practical halachas of all the latest poskim, the latest opinions. Yes, David, what did you want to say?
You were saying it's included in the machzor by mincha, but the machzor frequently has mincha for erev Yom Kippur also, okay. The davening has the Shabbos Siddur has mincha for erev Shabbos. So
okay.
I just wanted to ask if it's included by mincha for Yom Kippur, but it's probably not included for mincha by erev Yom Kippur.
No, of course
Just,
not.
oh, okay.
Well, yeah, for sure not. It can't be. It's a regular. That's a regular mincha. That, in other words, that people ate or eating. That people, how could it be? How could it be there? The it's not. I have a machzor right here. It's definitely not there. Um, but the mincha on Yom Kippur, it is included. So anyway, the bottom line is that the bottom line is that it seems, at least from anywhere I've gone, if they daven mincha gedayla, they do say alekenu. So I'm not sure. I see here he brings down the hayra hamuskemes is that you don't do nesias kapayim or say alekenu v'alekevasenu, which would be like where we are, where we don't do the actual berachas kayanim, if you daven before the zman of mincha katana, which would be anywhere before 3:30 in that ballpark. And he brings also that some add that don't do berachas kayanim if it's before plaga mincha, even later than 3:30. 4:45 would be the cutoff. And he says lechatchila, preferably you should do berachas kayanim only if it's within a half hour of shkia. So wow, that seems like there's a lot of strict rules. But wherever I've gone, if they daven mincha early on a fast day, they always, they always, maybe this is a mistake, but this is seems to be what people do. But I found in the Mishnah Berurah source that maybe it's acceptable, and that is that he brings here in the Mishnah Berurah. They bring in chapter Kuf Chaf Tes 129. He says that on a fast day of mincha, they decreed even by mincha time not to, because of a fast day, because of other minchas. But on a fast day that doesn't have ne'ilah, since mincha is late, so it's similar to ne'ilah that you would daven on Yom Kippur, and it's not going to be confused with mincha of other days. Therefore, um, therefore you do nesius kapayim. You do the berachas kayanim in our minchas. And the Mishnah Berurah brings that they had a minhag to daven mincha earlier on a regular day, and on a fast day they would daven mincha late. Now, on a day that has ne'ilah, they would daven mincha earlier, and therefore it would be similar to the regular mincha of a weekday. So, in a fast day that has ne'ilah, they said is different than a mincha. We're not going to be confused. But on a day that there's no ne'ilah, then you daven mincha late, and then it's not a proud. Then you can say nesias kapayim. Now the Mishnah says we don't do nesias kapayim year round, only on Yom Tov and only on Musaf. Nevertheless, the issue would be, do we say Elokenu v'Elokevasenu? And if it's a time that's fitting to do Berachas Kayanim, you could say Elokenu v'Elokevasenu, which basically means that if it's a time that we wouldn't tell the kohen to stop, as long as we don't tell the kohen to stop, then you do berachas kohen. So that seems to be the rule of berachas kohenim. In other words, that we say elokenu we do the berachas kohenim as long as it's a time that that if a kohen went up to duchen, we wouldn't tell him to go down. Then you could do alakena alakevasenu. So, for example, it says over here, a kohen that went to duchen on Yom Kippur at mincha, since it's known that there's no shikrus, so you don't take him down. You don't tell him to go down. You let him do his berachos kohen, right? Because we don't do that. So because of that, it seems that that's why we do it.
Hi. Hey.
It seems that that's why we do it mincha time on Yom Kippur, which has ne'ilah. And so Yom Kippur, again, it's a little confusing here, but I'm just trying to explain where our minhag comes from. On Yom Kippur, there is ne'ilah, which means that we daven mincha a little early. Our mincha is early. And because our mincha is early, it seems that maybe it could get confused with a mincha during the regular day. And therefore, mincha, we definitely should not do berachos kainim. And Shulchan Aruch, it clearly says you don't do real berachos kainim at mincha time. But it does say that if a kohen went up, you wouldn't tell him to go, you wouldn't tell him to leave the platform, you wouldn't tell him to go down. Because of that, we say, in fact, the Ramah says this. Therefore, he says at mincha on Yom Kippur, we say even though it's not really fit to do berachos kayanim, to do nesios kapayim, but the Ramah says, since if it went up, we wouldn't tell him to go down. In other words, if he went to duchen, we wouldn't tell him to go down. We let him do duchening on Yom Kippur at mincha. If he went up, he shouldn't go up. But if he went up, we don't tell him. So therefore, it's considered it's fit for nesios kapayim, and that's the minhag. Even though some argue on this, so that explains Yom Kippur. Now, what I was understanding from that is that a regular fast day, on a regular fast day, seemingly the halacha would be the same. If a kohen went up to duchen, even though they davened early, seemingly they wouldn't tell him to go down. In other words, they wouldn't tell the kohen you can't do berachos kohenim, even though because it's the davening early. So therefore, seemingly the same reason we would do alakena alakevasenu, and at our mincha, because it's sort of considered apropos to some extent. It's fit for berachos kohen.
Rabbi,
yes.
On Shabbos, we generally daven mincha late, and because I don't know if it's connected, but there's the minhag not to say good Shabbos after mincha. So they don't want to daven mincha early, I'm assuming, because they don't want to restrict the person's ability to say good Shabbos because of the connection with David HaMelech passing away.
Right.
So I'm wondering if Yom Kippur that falls on Shabbos may be any different than a regular Yom Kippur. In other words, you follow what I'm saying? The minhag the daven mincha late on Shabbos, because of that. I don't know if it's because of that restriction, but it might be a reason because of that restriction of being able to greet somebody with a good Shabbos.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Are there people that really do that? That's the reason they daven mincha later on Shabbos, because of that, because they want to be able to say good Shabbos. Have you seen something like that written, or is that your own thought?
No, yeah.
It's your own thought. Okay.
Yeah, because if you can't say good Shabbos to somebody, you daven mincha at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the entire day you're restricted. Somebody says good Shabbos to you, you can't even return the greeting.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I've heard, I've seen that somewhere that or I've seen it written or I've heard it. But yeah, that definitely is such a concept that you don't say good Shabbos after you daven mincha. But of course, you know, you don't say good Shabbos, but it's good to see. You know, you could say something else. You know what I mean? You know, say, oh, it's good to see you. You know,
Right.
thank you. You know. a guten, whatever. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't. I think that's. I think you're making a little taking it too far. You know what I mean? Like some people daven mincha later in order for that. I don't know. I don't know that people do that. I've never heard of such a thing. Okay, so anyway, that's what it seems like for our minhag. Okay, now let's go back to our Gemara. Now that we touched upon that. Oh, then the other thing that that was brought up yesterday was this concept of and Ezra brought it up about davening mincha. I'm sorry, saying Mesias Kapayim at night. And that really connects to our Gemara as well, because we're going to see that the Berachas Kayanim is supposed to be like serving in the Beis Hamikdash, and if so, we don't do Ein Sheiros Balayla. There is no service at night, and the same thing as Berachas Kayanim is not really supposed to be done at night, and that creates a big problem on Yom Kippur, because they do Berachas Kayanim in Ne'ilah, and Ne'ilah is often davened even really late. I mean, sometimes people even go into the night, like they're running late. Some shuls run late, and they do. And the question is, do you do Berachas Kayanim then? So this is brought in the Shulchan Aruch in chapter 623, where it mentions about Berachas Kayanim. It says the time of Ne'ilah is you're supposed to finish it near Shkia, and the Shliach Tzibur has to shorten the slichos in the verses in the davening in order to finish before Shkia, and the reason for that is that in order to do Berachas Kayanim at the right time. Now, 1 second here. Now, the question is, what does it mean, really? You have to finish by Shkia. So the Mishnah Berurah says it means the end of Shkia, not the beginning of Shkia. Shkia means sunset. Normally, we translate it as sunset. But here it says it means you want to finish it before Tzeis HaKochavim, just a little before Tzeis HaKochavim, before the dusk. And now, he says that you have to start a little early, and you mention Hayom Yifna, Hashemesh Yavai V'Yifna. There's a sentence there that says the sun is coming now and turning into night, which means it's still day. So you have to say that before it's actually night, and so you want to make sure to say that at the right time. If it's not actually night already, otherwise it's like saying a lie before Hashem. So I'm just trying to see where. So the Piskei Teshuvos over here in Tuf Reish Chaf Gimel in this chapter, which is all about Yom Kippur. So he brings down. This is where I saw it over here. So, so it's in Sif Daled. Noisin Kapayim. You do Berachas Kayanim in Ne'ilah. The Shulchan Aruch says this. You do Berachas Kayanim in Ne'ilah, and the minhag is not to do Berachas Kayanim. In other words, the Mechaber, the Beis Rabbi Yosef Cairo writes that you do Berachas Kayanim in Ne'ilah, and the minhag in these Medinas is not to do Nesias Kapayim. and you say Avinu Malkeinu. Now, second, and you say Avinu Malkeinu, even if it's on Shabbos. Okay, that's fine. That's not connected to this. Now, Mishnah Berurah says you do Nesias Kapayim, and the Eli says if it's still day, but if it's already dark, you don't do Nesias Kapayim because it's considered Avodah, and Avodah is only by Yom, only by day, and therefore, if there's not enough time, you know what you should really do? You should finish the davening with Nesias Kapayim, and skip the extra paragraphs there. And you can say it afterwards. After you finish davening, you do Berachos Kayanim. Then you could do the piyutim, it's called, the extra paragraphs. Now, what about So he says we don't do, the minhag is not to do the Berachos Kayanim, and even if it's still for sure day, we don't do it. And the reason is the reason why it's not done, he says, is because many times it will end up being at night, and therefore there's a minhag not to do Berachos Kayanim. Now, he says that nevertheless you could do Elokenu Elokevasenu, where you're not going to do Berachos Kayanim. You do that Elokenu, you do the paragraph that's about Berachos Kayanim, and even though it's at night, it's not a problem because you started the davening by day. It's no problem. Now the Piskei Teshuvos brings down. So in other words, if you want to do Berachos Kayanim, it sounds like it's a problem to actually do Berachos Kayanim at night, but if you're just saying Elokenu, that's not a problem. Now, in the Piskei Teshuvos, he brings down that the minhag is in Eretz Yisrael, like the Shulchan Aruch, you do Nesias Kapayim, and in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he says until Tzeis HaKechavim, until dusk, you could really do it. Now, in the Sharat Tzion over here, which is the Mishnah Berurah's other little notes, so he says he has a question if you can really do it up to dusk. In other words, up to sunset, for sure you could do it. Up to dusk, the Sharat Tzion here seems to question if you could do it. The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch seems to say it's fine until dusk, but the Sharat Tzion seems to question it, and then there's certain leniencies, maybe until a certain amount of time before dusk. He says it's okay, and some say that if you want to rely on, there are those to rely upon even if it's after dusk. Wow, so that's a very extreme heter. So some write that she'elu she'asmuch asimchen b'diavad, to do it even if the davening lasts until after dusk, they have who to rely on. So really, the cutoff time is dusk. Well, according to the Alter Rebbe, and according to the other opinions, it seems like it's a little before dusk, maybe sunset, maybe a little time after that, either 13 minutes after that, 13 and a half minutes after that, he wants to say over here, or maybe depending on where you are. Some places it could be a half hour before dusk. But basically, there are different opinions as to when Berachos Kayanim is acceptable to do, and this would apply in Ne'ilah in many shuls. But according to the Alter Rebbe, it seems like it's a lot simpler because as long as it's before Tzeis HaKechavim, it could be done. But then again, here in America, we don't do Berachos Kayanim, the Ashkenazim. It's really applicable for Sephardic people because Ashkenazim here, we don't do the Berachos Kayanim in Ne'ilah. We'd say Elokenu and Elokenu Elokevasenu. It seems like there's no problem with saying Elokenu, because you started. The Mishnah says if you started it by day, it's no problem. I'm guessing that the reason why some are lenient to say Berchos Kayanim, even after dusk, is probably because they rely on the fact that you started the davening by day, so therefore the Nesius Kapayim, it's sort of connected to the beginning of the davening. In a sense, it's pulled after when did you start davening. And I'll give you an example similar to, are you allowed to bring the fats of the sacrifice at night on the altar? The answer is yes. You slaughtered it, and you sprinkled the blood before night. So you're allowed to bring the fats afterwards. So seemingly that would be the reason why the opinions allow Berchos Koyanim. Again, this is for Sephardic people to do Berchos Koyanim, or maybe in Eretz Yisrael, even Ashkenazi. I'm not sure about Ashkenazic people in Eretz Yisrael. No, I guess it doesn't matter, right? So it's basically Sephardic people. For them to do Berchos Koyanim, it seems that might be a leniency if they want to do it, because of the fact that they started by day, so it's pulled after when the starting point. The starting point was kosher, so you could do the it seems like there's leniency to do Berchos Kohanim. Again, it depends on the minhag of the place. Every place seems to be different, but this gives us a little understanding. So our Elokeinu Elokeinu seems to be very easy to say Elokeinu, even though there are some times where maybe you wouldn't do the Berchos Kohanim and the Siyas Kapayim, but to say Elokeinu is not a problem. And basically it's based Elokeinu Elokeinu is based on, would you tell a kohen to get down? If you would tell a kohen to get down and don't do Berchos Kohanim, then you don't do Elokeinu Elokeinu. Otherwise, if you allow a kohen to continue, do his Berchos Kohanim, even though it's not the minhag and it's not normally done, but if you would allow him to continue, then that's a time when we say Elokeinu, and that would apply to fast days. That would apply to fast days, mincha being done early because the fast day, and would apply to mincha on Yom Kippur, and basically that would seemingly be the reason for the Elokeinu being said at times when our Gemara didn't seem to okay it. Okay, so getting back to our Gemara, now that we discussed these two issues, so and just to conclude about the Berchos Kohanim, that there are different opinions. If a person was in a Sephardic shul, you probably will find different views. If it's after Shkia, will they do the Berchos Kohanim or not? If they're running late, I mean, it seems a little surprising to me because I'm not familiar with such a thing. Like, according to them, what would they do? They would have to finish Ne'ilah early, and then what? They just wait around to break the fast, or they do the piyutim later. They basically specifically arrange to have to skip the extra paragraphs and then just add them after. And there's a substantial amount of time between sunset and dusk. So
there are things to say.
There are officially things to say, or they set it up in a way that they skip.
There are things to say. You still say silichot. You also there are things that are normally said from slichot from Rosh Hashanah that you can
that you add.
Etc. until you reach the time period. So I know it's one of these things like hurry up and wait kind of things, but it happens, and it happens every year.
Right.
And do exactly the same thing every year. That's how
now.
We get it.
Now, in the machzor itself, are all these things printed there after the end of the Ne'ilah Shmona Esrei? They're all printed there afterwards. Oh, interesting. Okay, so in other words, your machzor is set up for the minhag, for the way it's done. In other words, in other communities, they don't need that. It doesn't because they don't need those prayers then, because it's they're not going to be doing the Berchos Kohanim in Ne'ilah, and for them it's fine. They could say Elokeinu even later. but your Machzor has certain prayers that are in there to do after
Yeah,
the Shemona
yeah.
Esrei.
Give me a second, I'll get my master.
Okay.
You don't have to wait for me. I'll find it and I will tell you, and
Okay.
I'll come back.
No problem. Okay, fine. Very good. So let me just let's just go over what we learned yesterday. The Gemara had said about the number for prayers on these days of fasts. The Gemara explained that it doesn't mean all fast days have four prayers. It means up to four prayers. You would do the Berchos Koyanim. And we discussed and mentioned that there's those that hold that this is biblical to do all the four different prayers. There are those that hold that it's only rabbinic, and there are those that hold it's only a minhag. Then we mentioned that the argument between the three rabbis in the Brisa, that there was Rabbi Meir, who says at all four prayers you do Berchos Kohanim, you have the Kohanim do the Duchening. Rabbi Yehuda said only at Shachris and Musaf, and you do not do the Berchos Kohanim at Mincha Ne'ilah. And then we had Rabbi Yossi, who was sort of in between. He said you don't do the Berchos Kohanim at Mincha, but you do it at Ne'ilah. And the Gemara discussed the reasons behind these rabbis. Basically, it boils down to Reb Meir looks at what day is today. Is today a fast day? Then there's no reason to be concerned. You could do Berchos Koyanim, all of the prayers. Look at the day. It's a fast day, then do Berchos Koyanim. It's not a fast day, then there's a problem with doing Berchos Koyanim at Mincha. But as long as it's a fast day, then you're fine, because no one's going to be drunk. The opinion of Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we're worried. We make a decree because of the regular day that someone would be drunk, and therefore even on fast days we're not going to do it at Mincha or at Ne'ilah. Rabbi Yossi says the only issue would be Mincha, because you don't do Ne'ilah on a regular day, so you're not going to get confused when you do Ne'ilah. If the Kohanim do the blessings at Ne'ilah, it's not a problem, because prayer is not found during the regular days of the year, and therefore you don't confuse Ne'ilah with a prayer with Mincha prayer. But Mincha could be confused with Mincha, and therefore in Mincha we don't do the Berchos Kohanim according to Rabbi Yossi. And the Gemara had seemed to imply like the halacha is like Rabbi Meir. It brought it brought down three opinions. The first halacha was, the halacha is clearly like Rabbi Meir. Second one was like the Nagu Rabbi Meir, which we explained to mean that Nagu means it's actually not like Rabbi Meir, but we don't. If someone asks us, we don't tell them to do like Rabbi Meir. But if someone did it, it's okay. It's valid. We don't make him go back if he we don't tell them, the Kohanim, to go down, to get down from the from the platform where they do the Berchos Kohanim. So that's what it means, Nagu. And then the third opinion was in between, and that was the minhag is like Reb Meir, which basically means, because we're not 100% sure who the halacha goes like, we don't announce it in a shir, but if someone asks us, we would tell them to do that, to follow Reb Meir. So that's the three opinions about Rabbi. The halacha is the halacha like Reb Meir, and that's what it says. So it sounds like Reb Meir is, at least two of those three seem to say the halacha follows Reb Meir in practice. But then the Gemara says, no, Reb Nachman says the halacha is like Reb Yossi, and the Gemara concludes that the halacha is like Reb Yossi. So that's a little confusing there, but that's what it sounds like. The end is that the halacha follows Reb Yossi. Yes, Ezra.
Okay, so the comment is after the Kaddish, after the Amidah, there's a Kaddish, and the instructions are v'yarichu v'slichot ad she'yeh vadai laila. They extend the slichot until it's for sure night. ועוד יותר תוספת מחול על הקודש,
A little extra.
והמוסיף תבוא
Uh-huh.
עליו ברכה ויאמר 3 פעמים ויעבור בנעילה. You say ויעבור 3 times during
Vayavar.
נעילה.
What prayer is that? Vayavar.
ויעבור השם אדוני על פניו ויקרא.
Vayikra. So you do that 3 times. Okay.
Okay. So they do, you know, in the Aramaic, Rahmana di Karlan di Karamel Avraham Rechima, and the entire thing that goes with that. And then Anenu Elukei Avraham Anenu, and then Eloheinu Shebashamayim, Shema Konenu Kabel V'Tfilatenu B'Ratzon. You say the entire thing for that. And again, Kel Melech Emiel Kamocha Nosavon, and then they have specific psukim that you say 7 times for each one of them, and hopefully by that time it's already dark, and you say Kaddish, right. And then they blow the shofar 10 times. All
right, so it's basically been worked out. I mean, I guess it makes sense. They've the machzor fits with the minhag, so it's all set. It's set up that way. I was more wondering if they set their time that they're going to have to skip stuff from the Shmona Esrei and then do it later.
No, because they do everything in the Shmona Esrei.
Everything in Shmona Esrei they do at the time at the Shmona Esrei. Okay,
yeah.
Fine. Yeah.
And they try and ensure that when it's time to do Nesiat Kapayim, it's samuch. You do it right before Shkia if at all possible.
Makes sense.
There are times when I've said to the rabbi, you've already gone beyond the time for Shkia, and he basically says, let us worry about it, and they take care.
Right. In other words, he's following the other views, which the Alter Rebbe is one of those, and and there definitely were some other views that said you have a certain amount of time after Shkia. So there are those opinions to rely on. Even the Mishnah Berurah even brought a few that there are those who to rely on, even according to the Mishnah Berurah. So I guess they're following those. You're following the more strict view, but I guess they're trying to run a shul and they want to keep them in hagim of reciting Berachos Kohanim. Okay, anyway, that's the story. The Gemara, the final Gemara that we did yesterday was that the Gemara had a question of why do people do Berachos Kohanim at Mincha on a fast day if we said the halachas like Rabbi Yaisi, and the Gemara's conclusion was that because it's near Shkia, then therefore you don't do Berachos Kohanim. And because it's more similar to Ne'ilah, because in the days when they established the fast day, they would do when they established the rules, it was a time when they would do mincha early, and the rule of not doing Berachos Kohanim and mincha would apply if you daven mincha early. But if you daven mincha late, then it's not a problem. So what would come out from there, again, we discussed this the beginning of this class, all about Elokenu Elokei V'Seinu that we do with our mincha early when we daven mincha early is not a problem at all. But the question would be, what about in shuls like Sephardic shuls? Would they do Berachos Kohanim at mincha if they daven mincha early? And that seems to be a question. And the understanding that I have is that it's a machlokes. There is one of the poskim that they bring says you could still do it, and the reason is because that's the way it was established. That mincha you can do it. So even though now the reasoning doesn't apply, it would be okay. But I think the common, and what we saw in the Piskei Teshuvos is that the common minhag is not to do Berachos Kohanim at mincha, and that's the real Berachos Kohanim. In other words, what they're talking about there is the actual Berachos Kohanim, the Elokenu Elokei V'Seinu. That that paragraph that we don't have a kohen say that the chazan says, that's okay. That's not a problem. Again, it's a day that's fasting, and the kohenim are not drunk. There's no reason to suspect them for being drunk. So seemingly that should be fine, even if you daven mincha early. That's what it would seem. Again, it doesn't say it so clearly. It says it about Yom Kippur. So I'm assuming the same law would apply to the other fast days. Okay, now the Gemara now that we're up to is the Kulei Alma. We're on page 26b, and we are a few lines up from the bottom of the page, maybe 6 lines up from the bottom of the page, and 26b3 in the art scroll. Dukuli alma mias shikor also benesis kapayim. According to everyone, at least holds that. According to everyone, mias, however, a shikor is also a shikor, a person who's drunk, in doing nesias kapayim, in doing the blessing of the kohenim, lifting their palms and blessing the Jewish people, blessing the community. So everyone seems to agree that that's prohibited. The only question is, on a fast day, when they're not drunk, but they might confuse this prayer with the prayer on a regular day, and therefore we see that everyone seems to hold that if they are drunk, you for sure can't do it. So the Gemara says, immediately, how do we know this? So, because it doesn't say clearly that for the blessing of the kohenim, you can't be drunk. It does talk about not being drunk for doing the service in the temple, but it doesn't say for the blessing of the kohenim, that. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Mishum bar Kapara. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi says in the name of bar Kapara, Lamanis Muchabarshas Kohen, Mevarech Parshas Nazir. Why in the Torah does it put in Parshas Nasai? You have right next to the Berachas Kohenim those 3 blessings, 3 verses that are blessings that the Kohen blesses the Jewish people. Right next to that is the portion that has to do with the Nazirite. And the laws of a Nazirite, we know, are that a Nazir is not allowed to drink wine, anything from grapes and so on. So the Gemara says, why? You see why it's next to it? So it's next to it because we are darshaning, we're comparing the laws and saying that the person who's drunk is not allowed to do Nesias, Nesias Kapayim. A Kohen who's drunk can't bless the Jewish people. Lama Loimar, to tell you, Ma Nazir Asr B'yayin, just like a Nazir is prohibited to drink wine, Af Kohen Mevarech, also a Kohen that's blessing is Asr B'yayin, he's not allowed to drink wine and perform the service after he drank wine. So he would be Asr if he's doing the service, he's not allowed to drink wine, basically, just like a Nazir. So the Gemara asks, it's not such a very good comparison, because a Nazir is not even allowed to have the seed of the grape. He's not allowed to, it's not only about being drunk. He's not allowed to have anything from grapes. Maskul Avud Reb Zera, Avud, the father of Zera, asked, and some say it's Ishaya Bar Zavda who asked, Ima Nazir also B'chartzon. A Nazir, if you want to compare it to a Nazir is prohibited to have a chartzon, the seed of a grape. Af Kayin Mavarach Asr B'chatzon. Are you going to say that a Kayin is also prohibited to have a seed of a grape? Amar Rabbi Yitzchok. Rabbi Yitzchok says, Amar Kra. The pasuk says L'shar soil Baruch B'shma. He says no. It says that to serve Hashem. What's a Kayin meant for? To serve Hashem and to bless with his name. So Ma Meshares Mutter B'chartzon. So the Rabbi Yitzchok says the drasha is that you compare it in this verse. This is a whole different verse that it says that l'sharsai ulavarech b'shmai. What's the whole pasuk? The pasuk is in Devarim. It says l'sharsai, that Hashem set aside the tribe of Levi to carry the ark and of the covenant of Hashem, to stand before Hashem, to serve Him, and to bless in His name until this day. So that pasuk says to serve Him and to bless with His name. So ma mesharis mutter b'chartzon. So we learn from there that just like a mesharis, a one who's serving in the temple is allowed to eat a seed of a grape. So also, let me mute everyone here. Also, the kohen whose blessing is allowed, and he's allowed to have the seed of a grape. But what that means is that the Gemara is not backing out of the earlier lesson. The Gemara is keeping both. It's saying we have 2 places where kohen is similar to. He's similar to a nazir, And he's also the kohen whose blessing is similar to serving Hashem. So from the Nazir, we learn you're not allowed to have wine. From the fact that it says he's similar to someone serving to a kohen that's serving Hashem in the temple, meaning doing the service. So from there you learn, but he is allowed to have grape seeds. So from here, here you're not allowed to have wine. Here you're allowed to have grape seeds. The Gemara says, and we turn the page now, we're on 27a. Imam Eshares Bal Mum Loy. Maybe you're going to say that just like a person who serves Hashem, a kohen that's doing the service, is not allowed to be a Baal Mum, is not allowed to have a blemish. That any blemish, is a whole list of blemishes in Parshas Emor that talks about all the blemishes that a kohen has that can't serve in the temple. So maybe you're going to say a kohen that wants to bless the Jewish people, he can't have a blemish. So Mama Sharis Baal Mum Loy, that just like a person a kohen serving in the temple, it's not allowed to be a Baal Mum, it's not allowed to have a blemish. Av kohen mavarech, also a kohen that's blessing the Jewish people, Baal Mum Loy wouldn't be allowed to be a Baal Mum, can't have a blemish. And we know that that's not the halacha. The halacha is if he has something visible, that could be problematic. But if he has a blemish that's not visible, that's not seen by a regular person, doesn't have a big blotch on his face or something, that such a blemish, he's not disqualified. So the Gemara says, "Ha'iskesh l'nazir." He's compared, the kohen we said is compared to a nazir, just like a nazir could have a blemish. Also, a kohen who's blessing the Jewish people could have a blemish. So what comes out from here, at least at this point of the Gemara, is that a kohen is allowed to have a blemish if he wants to bless the Jewish people, as long as it's not visible and distractive. And he's allowed to have seeds of grapes, even though a nazir is not allowed to have that. He is allowed to, and as long as he's not drunk. That's the conclusion. How do we know this? Because we basically learn from nazir that he can't be drunk, but we don't learn from nazir that he can't have seeds, because we learn that a kohen who is allowed to have grape seeds. So that's not a problem. And we also learn that a kohen is allowed to have a blemish. We learned that from Nazir, that the Nazir is allowed to have a blemish. So the Gemara basically says, why do you see that in choose, what do you see that you're comparing the kohen that's doing the blessings always for a lenient ruling? You're constantly looking for leniencies. You compare him to Nazir and say he could have a blemish. You compare him to the kohen that's doing the service and say he's allowed to have grape seeds. Well, you're just grabbing leniencies. Who says? Maybe it's compared to give a more strict rule, that you take the strict rules from this one that it's compared to and take the strict rules from that one it's compared to, and you should prohibit him from having grape seeds and prohibit him from having a blemish in and blessing the Jewish people. So the Gemara says, how do you know to compare to leniencies? Compare Akish l'chumra, compare to the stringencies. And the Gemara concludes, Asmachta ninhu midrabanon ulakula. These are only something to support this law, but really it's a rabbinic law, and therefore we are just taking these ideas and leaning them on these verses. Again, it's not the meaning of the verse. It's an asmachta, which means it's something that we're leaning upon. We're getting support, but it's really rabbinic. And that's how the Gemara concludes. So that's the conclusion of this little piece of Gemara about a kohen not being drunk when he does the service. Okay, Zay gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day and an easy fast. And we'll see you in Yom Hashem at 3 o'clock.
Thank you, Rabbi.